Hey there, Coach. It's me, Dax, again. Back with another of our 30 Dates with Dax, where I am answering 30 of your most pressing questions, challenges, struggles that you have around coaching, coaching business, delivering coaching itself, or maybe just kind of like life, some of the things that are getting in the way, like self-confidence or challenges you have around motivation or self-esteem or any of those things, right? It's all fair game to me. Now, in this video, I'm sat out in my garden. Just stepped out of my my garden office. Just it's a lovely day, so I thought I'd sit out here, catch a few rays, and answer a few questions from the tribe. And this is an awesome question. This one's from Julia Laursen. So, Julia said, basically, it's a question about stealing, right? Many times, stealing I often think of as taking a great idea that moves you and inspires you as a coach to make it your own. What are your views on stealing coaching content? What is, after all, an original idea? We've all lifted or expanded or shrunk work of others, but I hear so many people judging others for doing it. I hear people, myself included, being put off from creating a similar service because they fear the judgment of getting called out for following someone else's great system, right? So that's a brilliant question. I'm sure that's going to be really resonant for a lot of people that are watching this at the moment. Stealing is a big issue, right? It's a big accusation, really, stealing. When you think about it, nothing in the world is new, right? There's that saying, there's nothing new under the sun. And I think it really is true, or kind of in most functional perspectives anyway, right? I know obviously kind of iPhones didn't always exist and all the rest of it, but ideas are an accumulation, and they're not just in individuals, they're a social accumulation. So the only reason that somebody thought to make an iPhone was because in the past somebody had made a phone, and the only reason somebody thought to make a phone is because the telegraph existed, and the only reason they thought to do that is because electricity was created, and so on and so forth, right? So you can see how this expands out. So the idea of accusing people of stealing is, in many respects, it's an unskillful idea, and it's an ungrateful idea, because it actually says, I got here all by myself, nobody else did shit for me, and this is completely down to me. Challenge though, right? Because on the flip side, as coaches and as business operators and as entrepreneurs, we put our heart and soul into the things we create, and there's nothing worse than seeing somebody kind of having, this has happened to me numerous times with products, with services, people that have attended weekend courses and seminars of mine, who've copied all the notes and gone away, and then suddenly they're out there in the world teaching other coaches the stuff that I taught them, literally off of my slides, and they've not had any success themselves and that kind of thing. Or people who've used copy off of my websites and literally said, wow, that page sounds really good, let me go and put that on my sales page, literally word for word. The only thing they've changed is their name, and actually once a person didn't even read all the copy and they left my name on their sales page, right? So there is stealing, and kind of stealing is possible, but let's kind of look at this in a kind of a practical way, like something that makes this a useful and skillful conversation that kind of helps you to decide whether you're stealing, or whether you're being influenced and inspired, and whether others are actually stealing from you, or whether they're being influenced and inspired. So some of the things that I look at is the distinction of whether somebody took something external and pushed it external, or whether somebody took something external and pulled it internal before pushing it external. So what do I mean by that? I mean, look, if I go on your website, I read a bunch of stuff, go, wow, that's good, and I take it and I put it on my website, just external to external, and I don't give you credit for it, then that is, in the greater sense of things, it's probably stealing, right? I've done nothing to make it my own. I've not adapted it. I've not kind of amended it. I've not done anything in any way, shape, or form to make it my own, and yet I want to take full credit for it because I'm not acknowledging you. However, if, on the other hand, if I come on one of your courses, your seminars, your workshops, and you teach me some stuff, I say, wow, that's really interesting, that's really inspired me, how would I say that? How would I do that? What could I add to that? What am I going to subtract from that? How can I amend that? How can I twist that and reform that and reshape that? Then that's not stealing, I've simply been inspired. Now, obviously, the closer I am to your original idea, the more I'm going to be thinking about whether I'm going to give you a lot of acknowledgement for it. And the further away from it I am, I may internally acknowledge it, but I may not acknowledge you publicly to everyone else, even though you've inspired me. I might go, actually, no, it was really good. But, plenty of Rumi inspires me all the time. There are plenty of people that aren't even alive. I mean, I can't, and I don't, and I probably won't acknowledge every single one of them externally to everybody. Here's another thing to think about. When you go to medical school, when you go to law school, you don't come out of law school as a fully qualified doctor or lawyer and claim that you invented law. Whoop. You don't claim that you invented law. When you first go into a job interview, when you first go into a courtroom, when you meet people and you talk about being a lawyer or a doctor, what do you normally say? You say, oh, I graduated from Yale or Harvard or Cambridge or whatever the university you graduated from. In other words, you acknowledge the source of the knowledge that made you the person you are. Now, if you happen to be a researcher, or if you've developed a new system of doing a certain operation or a certain medicine, right, then maybe now you start to say, I created this, or I'm the creator of this idea. Look, Rosa Parks, right? Rosa Parks didn't invent the idea of getting on and off of buses and heading across town, right? But you could say she, air quotes, invented the idea of a black person getting onto a bus, or getting onto a bus and heading across town in a culture, in a place where that was not only frowned upon, it was actually illegal at that moment in time, right? But she'd never be able to say that she was the first person to ever ride on a bus. It doesn't make any sense. But she added something to the getting on a bus experience for millions upon millions of people from that kind of point on in her life, right? She did something different to what was the norm. She did something different with the rules. She changed the game. She changed the story. If you're a medic and you invent something, you invent a new procedure, you've changed the rules, you change the game, you change the story. If you're a fairly new medic and you're kind of still fairly new to medicine and you don't work, it doesn't mean you're not a great doctor. You can be brilliant, but you don't suddenly say, "Oh, I created medicine." Medicine wasn't practiced the way I practice it until I showed up on the scene. Does that make sense? So now think about that as a coach. Like when you see other people's material, if you know one of the examples Julia gave was like, you know, going on Bandler's NLP course, or, you know, for example, being on one of my mind map programs, or whatever it happens to be. Right? You've attended a course. Now you've paid that person your hard-earned money to go and learn that stuff. But that's all you've done. You've paid the person the money to go and learn the material. You haven't paid the person the money to take the credit for all the material. Right? So if you went on an NLP course, if you came on Mind Map and you're teaching pure Mind Map and you are using my specific coaching exercises and my examples and my terminologies and everything else, and you don't give me some credit for it, in some respects you could say that you're stealing. If on the other hand you say, wow, that was an amazing course, and now out of that, I don't use Dax's worksheets for doing the environmental audit, so I still do environmental audits, and maybe or maybe not, you might want to credit me or not credit me at some point in the future. But hey, I do environmental audits, but I do them a really different way to Dax, so I tell the story differently. Well, now you've made it your own. In other words, you took something external, you pulled it internal, and then you presented it externally again. If you just take something external and present it external, then in the greater sense of things, and certainly for within the context of this conversation, and when I say stealing, I'm kind of like this, air quotes, stealing, because I don't really know if it's truly possible to steal ideas. But in the greater context of, I'm the one who did all the work, I created all that material, and you've basically put it out onto your website, and you're selling your programs off the back of my material, but without giving me any credit. In the greater sense of it, or in the way that most people talk about it these days, it's probably within the spirit of the concept of stealing. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that kind of maybe helps you, Julia, but helps you, many of you coaches who are kind of caught up in the same dilemma, the same kind of conundrum where you're thinking, man, I'm doing all these courses, I'm spending all this money, but I don't feel like I'm allowed to talk about it because it feels like it's stealing, or what. Internal, take it from the external, pull it internal. That's exactly what I did, right? I haven't created neuroscience, I haven't created coaching. I haven't created endocrinology. All these things are in existence already. But what I'm really, really good at is taking from those sources, sitting with it for a time and saying, well, how would I say that? How would I present that? How would I change that? And in all the appropriate places, I give the full acknowledgement to the sources. And when I don't feel it's appropriate, when I feel it's unnecessary because I've done something really unusual, something really different with the information, I often don't credit those people. Now, if ever they wanted accreditation, if they wanted If they wanted to be kind of acknowledged, then there would be absolutely no problem. But a lot of the time I simply don't, because I'm aware of what I've done to make it my own. Hope that makes sense. There's nothing new under the sun. But are you taking sunlight and saying you created it, or are you kind of pulling a mirror out of your pocket, and shining it somewhere else and saying, well, hey, kind of here's me doing something new with it and using it in a different way, right? Internalize it and then put it back out again, rather than just take it from there and put it over there and say, hey, yeah, this is my shit. Hope that makes sense. Love to hear your viewpoint on that. I'd love to hear your feedback. You don't have to agree with me, as usual. I'm not asking for agreement. This is simply a perspective. I've been asked a question. I'm sharing my perspective on it, but I'd love to hear what yours is. So please, put some responses in. Until next time, take care.